Let's talk about Soviet apartment blocks. We all know how dystopian and brutalist they look on the outside and on the inside, but I never see anyone talk about the upsides to these apartment blocks or the good parts about them, so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to be generalizing here because not every single building was the same, so if your experience was different, please let me know in the comments. There are two types. The first one is the Khrushchevkas, which are 5-story modular apartment blocks built in the 1960s. This was a very early use of prefabrication where concrete panels were made at a factory and then shipped to the job site and assembled. Here's one example. One building could take as little as 2 weeks to construct, and 64,000 were constructed in 7 years. And these were the Brezhnevkas, which were basically the 2.0 version of that. These ones were much taller, 9 to 12 or 15 stories. They were built between 1960 and 1980. I think they're pretty cool. I kind of like brutalist architecture. Like this one. This is called the Bagel. But that's probably because I spent the first 5 years of my life in one of these buildings. Not this one. This one's really cool. Now, the main advantage of a building like this is that it will keep you alive in 40 below weather. Russia's winters are very brutal. The walls were at least 12 inches thick, and many of these buildings had 2 panels of windows. Right, so one on the outside and then one on the inside with some air in between, and that contributed a lot to the insulation qualities of these buildings, as well as the mandatory carpet hung on a wall. I know people say that the insulation in these buildings are bad, but you have to remember that a Russian person's standards for insulation are much higher than someone who doesn't live in a place where winters are this harsh. They did have central heating system with radiators, and sometimes they'd break down in the winter and there would be no heat and no hot water. But these buildings would keep you from freezing in that type of weather if the heat goes off. You might have to go to sleep with all your coats on, but you will be alive in the morning. Another nice thing about these apartment blocks was that they were usually built around a park like this, where the kids could play and the elderly people could sit and gossip. It also meant that there was always an adult watching the kids. And since people tended to live in these buildings for decades, they knew all of their neighbors. And of course, the crowning achievement of the Soviet apartment block: a separate room for the toilet, separate from the tub and sink.